Well, welcome back to Game Changers. We're excited to have you along for this next lesson, and we've got a new special guest with us today. This is Lauren's wife, Lisa.
Hello, how are you, Josh?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Thanks for coming and sitting in on this session. But yeah, I'm hoping to show you something in a second, and I'll pop it up on the screen for you guys watching along at home. But I'm hoping you'll have a good look at this and tell me what you see. So I'll pop it up on the screen now. Okay. What do you see here?
Well, I see squares. I see one big square and lots of little squares.
Okay. What else do you see?
Well, that's what I see first. Let me see. I have to look a little deeper. It looks a little like a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, okay, right.
But
I like that.
There's a couple of extra rows on it.
That's the creative side of my wife coming out there. Rubik's Cube, the puzzle.
The puzzle, yeah, absolutely.
She loves puzzles, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
but
what else do you
If I was describing that to you, though, Lauren, I would. The outside lines are definitely darker and thicker than the inside lines. So when I think about it that way, maybe even like a bit of pigeonholes. I love pigeonholes. I like putting little things and everything. You know those big boxes from IKEA that you then put crates of toys or things in. So that's what I sort of see.
I love it. That's
I love it.
I love it. Well, if I was to ask you how many squares do you see, what would you say?
16.
Okay.
4 by 4.
Yep.
Oh, although now that you say that, there's one big square around the whole of that.
Right. So 17.
Yeah.
17 squares.
Is that all there is there?
Maybe not.
As Rafiki says, look a little harder.
Well, mathematically then, now that you've said that, definitely there's a lot of smaller squares that I could make within that 16.
Okay.
So those 4 could be a square, and then those 9 could make a square, and then those 4 and those 4. So, yeah.
Okay, so 21?
We're in 21. Probably square in the middle.
Yep.
So, did we do the other 4 top squares? Those ones in the middle. And those ones in that middle as well. There's even more.
Why don't we hit pause in a second? I wonder if we give our viewers at home an opportunity. How many squares can you find in this puzzle? How many is there in total when you really look closely at this?
All right, so we're going to hit that pause button. You ready?
Yeah. Okay, hit
pause.
Okay, how are our mathematicians going out there? Lisa's disappeared. She's got other puzzles to solve. But she's left us to solve this puzzle now. Yeah, right. Now, I wonder how you all went there now. I mean, the obvious one is the 16 individual squares, and of course the big outer square, because it's a big dark line around the outside. But if you look closely, you've got the groups of 2 or 4. And so you'll have the top left, the middle top, and the top right. And then, of course, 3 across the middle, 3 across the bottom, left, middle, and right-hand side. And now we can also look at groups of 9 little squares as well. So you have top left, top right, and then you'll have your bottom left and the bottom right. Wow. And when we add all of those up together, we get
30
squares. Wow.
Yeah. So, Lauren, my question to you, and obviously to the listeners at home, my question is, how does that metaphor that we just ran through, that simulation or that activity that we just went through, how does that relate to potential? After all, this session is all about having an opening look at potential. How does it relate? How does it transfer to a conversation around potential? What are the similarities between looking at that 16 square grid and finding other squares? What are the similarities between that exercise and looking at someone's potential or looking at my own potential?
Well, I noticed when Lisa was looking at, the first thing she notices is, of course, the big outer dark square around the outside. And so often it's like looking at a person and seeing the outer shell. the very superficial part of that person is often the most obvious, isn't it? And then if maybe you get to know them a little bit, you see all these little pigeonholes maybe inside, but they're the obvious little squares, aren't they? The obvious character traits or the obvious talents or abilities that a person might have, or even maybe when you even look at yourself, you'll see some of the very obvious abilities that you have. But it's not until we look a lot deeper and a little bit more closely at it we realise, well, hang on, there's more over here and there's more over there, and let's look deeper again, and there's actually some others as well when we got to those groups of 2 and 3 square blocks.
Right.
And so that's really like looking at a person, isn't it? We really do come in layers, and there are lots of interesting layers in underneath when we look closely at that. Absolutely. Of all different shapes and sizes.
Well, that's right. And I think that it's probably most prevalent in our relationship with ourselves, isn't it? It's like, I don't like my freckles, or I don't like my nose. My nose is quite a large nose, Lauren.
Is it?
I have a large nose.
Proboscis.
I have some weight on me that I don't particularly love. So we're pretty easy at picking up the physical attributes we don't like about ourselves. Sometimes we can be quite judgmental and judge a book by its cover when it comes to other people.
Do. And because, often, and we mentioned this in one of the very, very first sessions, Joss, it's easy for us to look at somebody else and see all these beautiful little compartments and abilities and talents they have, but yet all we see is the big thick square around our outer shell. So we're comparing our inadequacies with other people's amazing tapestry of ability,
And I don't think we have a natural instinct to look deeper. I think I asked Lisa, what else do you see? And she started to expand on what she saw. I think if I didn't ask that second follow-up question, if I just left it at, what do you see here? And she said, well, I see a large square and some smaller squares inside a large square. I think she would have been quite happy to move on and leave that, in that box, so to speak. Yeah. So I think we have a tendency to do that with others as well. It's like, well, the first thing we see is all we see.
And I think it teaches us something right there at the outset. We need to do, firstly, stop and listen, or stop and look and wait. Create that little moment, don't we? To really stop and look a little deeper than just the surface, but really look and listen to what's happening in underneath that surface a little bit more. And that requires time to do that, a little pondering, a little bit of thinking, and rather than just accepting the surface value.
Right. Well, we're here because we want to become emotionally healthy, or we're on a journey of self-improvement and we want to become the best versions of ourselves. So we can't do that unless we acknowledge we have potential, that we have potential to achieve, to do, to be more than we currently are.
And it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this box only had 30 options.
Yeah.
But what does the human soul have, How many options are there?
Well, it's interesting you say the box only had 30 options, but, Lisa saw a pigeonhole and a Rubik's Cube, So, you could look at it and see a checkers board or a chessboard or a net or, So there's tons of things you could see. So I guess the limit of potential could also be the limit of someone's creativity maybe, or...
Their innovation, their creativity.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Our potential is massive, and I certainly don't want us thinking about our potential being the size of that grid. I really want us thinking something much larger when we consider our potential. So I want us to go on a little bit of a dream journey right now. At home, if you want, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen for you to look at. If you're more comfortable closing your eyes, that's fine. But I want to take us on a journey. I really want us to start to imagine a giant castle. Okay, I'm talking, we're a couple of 100 meters away from this castle, and it is so large we can't see where it ends. If we look left, we can't see the end of this castle. If we look right, we can't see where it ends. If we look up, the towers, they go up into the clouds, and we can't see where the tallest towers end. This castle is so large, we can't actually see how large it is. All we know is that it is enormous. Well, let's go on the inside and take a little journey on the inside as we come in those large, heavy wooden doors.
Grand entryway into the foyer.
Absolutely.
And you hear this nice echo on the stone flags.
Absolutely. And
then
it opens
looking
up and there are hundreds of hallways that we can see. There are millions of stairs going up multiple towers, and there just appears to be rooms everywhere. Well, the first few rooms are the rooms that we're comfortable in, the rooms we spend the most amount of time in. For me, growing up, the first few rooms would have been like the class clown, the attention-seeking young man that loves to be in the spotlight.
Never would have guessed.
And yeah, there's a creative room for drawing or playing music. I love my guitar.
Well, for me, it was music too. The music
Absolutely.
room. Here we are here at the piano behind me.
Right.
I've still got a music room, and I share that with my wife and kids.
Absolutely.
But isn't it interesting that? And some of us may have a reading room or a television room or a games room, or there's all sorts of different rooms that we may be comfortable in.
Absolutely. Some of us have got more metaphorical rooms. So the self-loathing room where we just go to hate on ourselves and to think really dark thoughts. Or
they're probably the dungeons down in the lower floors.
Absolutely. If we keep looking back, we can see parts of the castle that we know are there, and maybe we've been there once or twice, but we don't venture down that far because we like to stay close to the front door in our comfort zone. And then beyond that, we can see areas of the castle we've never even been to before. And of course, beyond that, well, we don't know. We know the castle is large enough that if we were to spend our whole lives exploring the castle, we may not get to every nook and cranny, every corner of the castle. It's that large, we may not have enough time in a lifespan to explore the whole castle. But the reality is we don't go exploring our vast potential. We like to stay near that front door in our comfort zones. And of course, those rooms closest to the front door are different for all of us. They're probably the rooms that we are judged the most on. But they're not the totality of what it means to be me. There's so much more to me than those first few rooms that I spend the most of my time in.
And it's interesting, I noticed this as a young boy myself growing up, and you may notice it in your own life, There are certain talents and abilities that we have. Josh just mentioned his as the class clown. I mentioned maybe one of mine, maybe enjoying music and so forth. And they become like the obvious ones. And you don't realise what other talents you have. And I can think of a number of experiences for me where it might have been the support, encouragement and mentoring perhaps of other people. The way they look at me is very different to the way I look at me. And they come in and say, Josh, you know what, did you realise that you've really got a great ability to do... you've got a great ability to communicate, or a great ability you're a really good listener, or something, and you're like, oh, really? Well, I didn't realise that. I never thought about myself that way.
Absolutely.
And so all of a sudden you start discovering, well, actually that room down the hallway I didn't know it was there, but it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just like the grid that we were talking about, the 16 square grid, some of you might have gone away and pressed pause and had a look, and you may not have come up with 30 squares. You may have only come up with maybe 24 or 26 squares. And then it took someone like Lauren to come along and say, you know what, there's 30, let me show you. And that certainly has been the case in my life. I've had numerous mentors and people who've been really influential in my life come along and say, there's more to you than you realize, Josh. Let me show you. And so I'm sure you can think of someone like that that's had that kind of influence in your life. It might have been a teacher who spoke into your life when you were at school, or an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent who always believed in you. And that is such an important part. And I guess my question is, are we that person to ourselves? And are we that person to others? Or do we see the 16 squares, the pigeonhole, the Rubik's Cube, and leave it at that and move on and never give it a second glance?
I think some of us do that, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, we do that. And I think the reason why we are all here as part of our Game Changers community is because we want to discover more than that, or certainly achieve more than that. And so this is a great concept, Josh. I mentioned earlier in one of our very early sessions that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals character.
Yeah.
It uncovers what's already there. And so, you know, this castle we're talking about is a great metaphor. It might seem, you know, like more of a story, but really this does connect so closely with who we are as individuals and that amazing potential that exists right up here. It's already there, waiting to be discovered, just like walking through this big, massive castle.
Absolutely. Well, we have an activity for you, something to bring you up out of passive learning and into active learning. We really want you to label some zones in your potential. And I mentioned 5 zones, and if you want to come up with more, you can come up with more. But what are those first rooms that you spend a lot of time in, your comfort zone? What are they for you? What are you known for being and for your behavior? Who are you that you are known for? What do people see at first glance? What are those first rooms? And then what's the next zone a bit further into your castle within your potential? What are the aspects to you that you go to sometimes, but you don't live there, that people see from time to time, but they really have to take a second glance at you to see? And then the third zone is, what's the area of your potential that you know is there, but maybe you don't go there for whatever reason? You might want to explore that a little at the end of this video before pressing play on the next. Of course, there's the top of the towers. What does your penthouse represent? Is it marriage? Is it kids? Is it the size of your family? Is it how your relationship will end up being? Is it a career path? Is it an amount of money or a property portfolio? I don't know, but what does your penthouse represent? What kind of potential do you have here at full scale? And then, of course, we also discussed the dungeon. What part of your potential do you sometimes go into that's maybe not positive or maybe not healthy? And it's a good opportunity, a good reflective exercise to explore that. Write down some labels, write down some names, because that's going to come in handy in some sessions to come.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to it. This is really, really great. I can see some of my own aspirations up there in that penthouse, Josh, and I can also see, some of the scarier things, or those, dark or frustrating or discouraging elements too that lie in the dungeons.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be honest with ourselves and really help our whole castle experience to really become quite an enjoyable place to be.
Absolutely. Well, we'll leave you with that exercise to do now before you hit play on the next video. Thanks so much for watching.